practices of secularism, because liberalism and secularism in many ways is a way of homogenizing communities. In that terrain, when we talk about the Uniform Civil Code as the uniformity of rights, I want to read a quotation from Upendra Bakshi where he addresses the question of uniformity. He says, questions concerning uniformity go beyond the agenda of reform of the Hindu or Muslim personal law formations. The UCC discourse ignores the fact that for tribal women, the issue stands post also in terms of a now, unfortunately, Hindutva-dominated issue of assimilation with the mainstream. Further, in what proportion may the state and the law take recourse to domination without hegemony in combating human rights offensive practices? So this, he thinks, is a pertinent question that modern feminism should take up, modern human rights issues should take up. So when we talk about secularism or uniformity, are we talking about a uniformity or a homogeneous normative notion of the state and rights? What are the rights that would drive Muslim women? What are the notion of the rights? What kinds of rights that Muslim women would demand? As in the case of triple talaq debate, we have seen the kind of rights discourse that has been put up for Muslim women. Is that the demand made by Muslim women? Do they really need a ban of triple talaq, or is it something else that they would require? For instance, I have heard many of the I have witnessed protests against this particular campaign on triple talaq, and where I have heard Muslim women coming up in public and saying what we need is empowerment, what we need is education, what we need is job, and this particular ban is not going to help us in any way because there are already other provisions for us to meet with this question of to contest this idea of triple talaq. So what I'm trying to say is feminism itself in some ways should rethink about its own domain of power, the power it wields, mainstream feminism as such, the kind of ways in which it can inflect discourses, it can affect discourses. So I feel the current discourse on triple talaq is in some ways shows the lack of mainstream feminism in India to look into diverse forms of womanhood, to think about diverse subjectivities. In many ways, for instance, Dalit women talk differently is one perspective upheld by Dalit women at a particular point, and it has been taken seriously these days in feminism. Likewise, to think about Muslim women, I really feel a platform within the community is more important than people from outside coming and trying to reform Muslim women. So if at all there is a reform, it is meant for Muslim women, it is meant for practicing Muslim women, and it is a reform that they have to live with. And therefore, let them carry it on rather than somebody else from outside trying to give a discourse for them. I'll stop here and I'll be happy to take up questions.
I thank Dr. Serene for enlightening us on the nuances of UCC and sharing her views. Now I would like to speak a few words about our next speaker, Professor Faizan Mustafa. Professor Faizan Mustafa is currently the Vice Chancellor of Nalsar Law University, Hyderabad. Earlier, he has served as the Vice Chancellor of NLU Odisha, and where he introduced highly innovative legal education curricula. He has also been the founder director of KIT Law School, Bhubaneswar. Prior to that, he was the Dean Faculty of Law, Aligarh Muslim University. He has his bachelor's and master's from Aligarh Muslim University. He was awarded PhD in 1996 in intellectual property law. He has written a research paper on the need of recognizing domestic work as a work in 1995, which eventually on 2012, the government of India agreed to bring a bill on the issue. He has also written on data protection laws and has compared laws of 44 countries. He has written 8 books and contributed more than 150 articles, most famous among them being books on AIDS law and human rights and strict liability in criminal law, as well as a book on dismissal of state governments by center under Article 356. He has campaigned for the enactment of... Okay, thank you, sir.
Is this the mic or this one is it? इससे हम और ऊंचा कर सकते हैं? All right. I am nervous because other than Mahmoodur Rahman Sahab, I don't have image of any other vice chancellor. So he is my vice chancellor, and I'm really scared of him. I am his great admirer, but like all old good vice chancellors, he is able to create some kind of awe and fear. So that fear continues even though he has been highly affectionate towards me. Now I was his blue-eyed boy in Aligarh, and the story started like this, that I was going for a conference to Malaysia and my dean and chairman refused to give me leave, and I was a temporary lecturer at that point of time. So I wrote a slip to the vice chancellor, then vice chancellor, that I am temporary, and if you don't give me leave, and if I go, then I may lose my job. So there was a long queue, but I was called in. He has read by that time the article I had written in Hindustan Times against TADA. The title of the article was "The Law That Terrorizes," and my thesis was this law is bad and unconstitutional. Then he asked me, what else you are doing these days? So I told him I am studying Islamic law of evidence. And then we had some discussion about this 2 female is equal to 1 male evidence. And then I still remember that I said, sir, what is evidence? Evidence is that you saw something or you heard something. And if this is the case, then the entire hadith literature is evidence. So do we reject the ahadith which are narrated by Bibi Aisha just because we say that they are of some less value than the ahadith which are from, say, Abu Hurairah radhiyallahu ta'ala anha or somebody else? He immediately gave me leave. I went for the conference and returned. And believe me, I had gone for some 15 days. I had to return within 4 days. Because I don't know whether he fixed the selection committee or Jafri Saab, who was then the registrar and pro-vice chancellor, fixed the selection committee, but I had to rush back. And that day there was a selection committee of professor, followed by reader. Associate professor used to be called reader at that point of time, and then lecturer. So lecturer will come at the end. So when I entered for the associate professor selection committee, because by that time I had put in 5 years of service. You know, in Aligarh you will remain ad hoc for many, many years. So I was there for 6 years. So I was eligible in terms of teaching experience for the post of associate professor. I still remember, sir, you said, I will appoint you, in his typical characteristic style. But you have to answer all the questions which I have put to the professor's candidates. The bar will be higher for you. Fortunately, I was able to answer all the questions. I was appointed as directly as reader. I was never appointed as permanent assistant professor. I made a jump. And that's why I became one of the youngest vice chancellors at a very young age, because Rahman Saab gave me that break. Then within few years, there was another story. There was a post of human rights professor in political science. And my friend, who was his secretary, Asmar Beg, said, well, you have done quite a work and Supreme Court has quoted you 4 times and human rights is a new field. Why don't you apply? I said, but I have not put in 10 years of teaching experience. So he said, but for professor, the qualification is loosely worded. It is not necessary that you must have 10 years experience. So I applied, and of course, the dean and the chairman rejected my application. Then again, I was advised by my friend, at least Rahman साहब को तो बताना चाहिए. So you make a representation to him. And this is how you have to look at what was his commitment to Aligarh Muslim University. And I can tell you that I have seen number of vice chancellors, about half a dozen of them or maybe more. I have not seen that kind of commitment in any other vice chancellor. And the kind of people who are in fray in queue, I don't see that this is going to happen in near future. So immediately I was called. And what I wanted at that time was just to be called for interview, because I was keen to get the constitutional law professorship in my faculty, law faculty. So I just wanted an interview call, because on the basis of this call, I can be called there in law. He said, but I am going to appoint you, but you have to have a deal with me. Now, having a deal with the vice chancellor of Aligarh, and if you are a candidate, I was, sir, what is the deal? He said, you will be appointed, but you have to give me in writing that you will not leave university for 10 years. Sir, this is what you said. For one full decade, you have to stay. I said, sir, but your successor is not bound by